Hello, and welcome to another episode of Such a Nightmare, Conversations about Horror. Once again, I am Katherine Troyer, and once again, I am joined by Anthony Tresca.
Ho, ho, hello there.
Oh, how long were you sitting on that?
When did we record the first episode?
Oh gosh.
I've been thinking about it for a while, but I wanted to save it for our spooktacular episode today.
Yay!
So, I just put that one away in the bag of puns so that then I could give that gift to all of our listeners on today, Christmas Day.
So, for those of you that have joined us before, or if this is your very first time and you're already unsure because that pun just has pushed you right on the ledge, this is a podcast devoted to thoughtful discussions about that fine line between the horrific and just the horrible. Each episode looks at a specific horror text that is, for better or worse, giving us nightmares.
And we are so excited to have you join us today for our discussion of 2019's Black Christmas.
Yes, so this is indeed a spooktacular episode as we are releasing it on Christmas Day as part of our cycle and as our sort of capstone on our Black Christmases. So we've worked our way through the 1973 film and the 2006 film, and we highly encourage you to listen to both of those because I do actually think there's a very interesting narrative that emerges in seeing them in relationship to one another, which even though if you were to not have the films be called Black Christmas, I'm not sure I would say to you, hey, Anthony, I have these 3 films that I found that I think build a beautiful relationship together. But since they are all named Black Christmas, since they all are operating under that umbrella, there is a relationship that is forced to emerge, and it's a really interesting one to kind of see how it has evolved. And where we've ended up, that is, I think, both finally getting back to the spirit of the 73 film, but also, I think, failing still to capture the magic of the 1973 Black Christmas.
Yeah, it's really frustrating that the most feminist film was made in 1973. The most feminist version of this text was made in the 70s.
Yes.
It's kind of ridiculous, and a little sad.
It is, and I think it's particularly sad because the 2019 film is trying to be as about feminist as it can get, and I think that it, we even have a female director and writer, which is lovely and always exciting to see, and we have some actresses that have since gone on to do lots of other great things.
I really like the lead actress. She's in an indie film. Her name is Imogen Poots. She's in The Art of Self-Defense with Jesse Eisenberg. It's a fantastic film. She's a great actress.
Yes. And I think that one of the things that this film had that was at its best is that the caliber of the acting of all characters, I think, was at the highest for the 2019, because the 73, had some sort of hammy characters that you didn't really need to have great actors for. You just needed to have, someone that could be over the top. But this film tried really hard to have very real female characters, and so you would think that it would be potentially our most feminist one. But what is it for you that prevents the 2019 film from being able to claim that label?
Well, I think it's primarily the introduction of magic into the film, which is an element that is not present in the 1973 version and is not present in the 2006 version. This film chooses to equate all of the killings as being from this magic goo that's in the bust of the founder of their university and is causing all these boys to go full alpha and do all these things. And I think that leads to some really problematic things in terms of the ultimate themes and message that we're supposed to take away from the film.
I agree. So let's talk through the magic, and then let's talk about some of the other places where this film may not be quite as successful as it hoped in terms of its gendered message. So, okay, problem one with the magic is that when you introduce this idea that the reason that these dude bros have become extra dude bro-y is specifically because of an external supernatural element. An external supernatural element that's tied very specifically to a slave owner, right? So like the baddest of the bad as far as America gets. That completely removes any of the potential to have a conversation about how maybe toxic masculinity is actually a cultural issue and responsibility, and not just, you know, something that can be fixed by a coven.
Yeah, I think it really serves to downplay a lot of the really serious issues that get brought up in this film, and it really serves to just kind of like be like, yeah, these problems, they're not that bad, and if you just like remove the magic, it'll be fine. It's super. It like makes it feel like it's not really a real problem, even though it is a real problem. And so I'm left feeling very frustrated by this juxtaposition that the movie forces on the viewer.
And I think it's exacerbated by the idea that it's not just this particular group of men. It's all men have the potential to have this alpha unleashed. And I don't know. I think that's actually a very problematic message, because it first implies that the idea that boys will be boys is actually true, right? That if allowed to channel their ultimate alphaness, they will be how we expect them to be. And there's even the line, you know, where the security guard says boys will be boys, and then he like pauses, and we are supposed to understand that like he knows that he shouldn't have said that. But the film is actually reinforcing that message by suggesting that anyone, including our romantic, you know, male lead, has the potential. Yes, Landon has the potential to succumb, at least temporarily. And the fact that the only male who managed to break free was also an other. Racially, we kind of get the impression socioeconomically, and
at least socially as well. He's not shown to have any other friends in the university setting.
That was a really profoundly problematic and simplistic construction. And I know a lot of the criticism that exists about this film is centered on this idea that it creates too clean of good and evil, and it does so the moment that magic is introduced. We talked about the fact that there are other problems that emerge by using this magic framework.
Yeah, and I think that a big thing that caused me a lot of discomfort, and I think is just frustrating about the film, is that it brings up a very serious subject of rape culture that is perpetuated by frats at universities. And this could honestly be broadened to just rape culture that exists in our society today, because particularly in America, we have a culture of rape. And that is a real problem, and the film forces us to think about this as being a real problem. But yet, the film then simultaneously equates this rape to the magic-y elements that are going on in the film, which then undermines the severity of the rape that this main character experiences, and it's just like, oh, well, if there was no magic, then it wouldn't have happened. It's just, which is frustrating, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's a similar issue that what bothered me is this idea that it suggested that rape is just as, not unlikely, but just as supernatural, right? Like, just is like, it's not of this world, right? Like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
caused by systemic issues. It's caused by the need for this cabal of men to take over the world.
Yeah, and I think it further it further removes it from the real world by only showing the rape in dream flashbacks, and so it does everything it can to remove the rape from being within the real world that it firmly establishes, and since it also establishes that magic is in this other real world, and it kind of frames the magic in a different way, we are left with no choice but to equate the two. And that is frankly problematic, and it's deeply frustrating. It's a deeply frustrating depiction.
It is. And if we remove ourselves from the magic, but still talking about the theme of rape, I also think it's a problematic message for a film that is so obviously articulating itself as a feminist film, that that there is one way to overcome rape, and that is to be a fighter. And I'm not saying that one should forever dwell within trauma to the point that you're not able to live your life, right? I don't think that it is fair to ask people to feel always like they are broken. But I don't think necessarily that the opposite of being a victim is being a fighter in the way that this film depicts being a fighter. Because it's not just the literal fighting that happens at the end, right, when she has that epiphany and joins her fellow sisters. It's also other moments, such as you should have to confront the perpetrator of the crime, right? You should have to confront them. You should have to be aggressive. And I don't know, I thought that was a problematic low-key narrative that kind of ran through, that because it was low-key, and because we are shown that she is being rewarded for being a fighter at the end, I think could easily slip under the radar. But it just struck me as again creating this really simplistic dichotomy, that a more nuanced understanding of feminism relies more heavily on the idea of intersectionality, that our identities are shaped by all of these converging but not necessarily harmonious elements. And of course that comes to us from Black feminism, which realized that the second wave feminism was not quite,
and third,
that neither of them were understanding that we could not have a homogenous definition of what it meant to be female or what it meant to be feminist. And I think in part by using this metaphor of sisterhood, right, and of the ants, and actually saying ants are all work together.
We are all the
all
same,
more or less the
you
same,
can't kill
right?
us
Exactly.
We are the same.
That it created a little bit of a problematic construct.
Yeah, I think it paints all women as being the same and all men as being the same, in which a more intersectional approach would solve, because it takes it into account the multiple systems of oppression that are based on many different individuals, based on their different backgrounds, and that includes socioeconomic, that includes gender, race, all of these various things. Whereas this film really wants, I think it wants to have that larger systemic critique of the problem, but it doesn't do it, because by embracing this metaphor of the fighter, it really does make it seem like an individual thing. If you just fight hard enough and you get away from that person and you beat up the person who raped you, you're going to be fine forever. But that doesn't actually do anything to fix the larger cultural problem that has created a culture that is so tolerant of rape, that allows and encourages men and women. It's rape culture. Applies to is a larger systemic problem that applies to it's everyone.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the film tries to briefly introduce that idea, right, through the character of Helena. But I would like to quickly remind people of the names of our characters, because our 4 female characters who are not all going to make it, but who are sort of like the core 4, are named Riley, Chris, Marty, and Jess. And our only character who's going to have this super weird, like, we just have to accept our place and step behind them, but we still get to be in the parade, or like whatever it is that she said. Her name is Helena, right? She has a feminine name. And I don't know, there's just, like, there's something really strange about the way that this film constructed all of this and tried to say, you know, it's not just the men that subscribe to the system, it's women have to support it in order for it to continue to exist. And I'm not saying that women are supporting rape, right? But I'm saying that the mentality of boys will be boys is supported as much by women as it is men. The director, the writer, raises this idea in this film that, like, women are a problem and can be part of the problem too. And then it just quickly, before we could get anywhere interesting with that, has, you know, them kill her, and the men are like, sorry, babe, you know, take one for the team. And I thought that instead that character could have been so terrifying.
Yeah.
She could have been such an interesting, fascinating character, because she's the one that at the beginning of the film we think is possibly being raped, right? So like, there, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, there's just so much that could have been done.
Yeah. I mean, because there is a lot of, like, women against feminist movements. And I mean, there are the Phyllis Chaffethree, I can never remember how to pronounce her last name. She's the woman who was against the Equal Rights Amendment, the passage of that.
Oh.
She argued so effectively, and is the reason we don't have the Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution today. And she was a woman, and she was arguing these things and arguing how it would set back women by having these things. And so there are really interesting things to be done with that type of a character, because we've seen them in real life, and it continues to happen over and over again. I mean, it's this kind of, I think this film falls into girl boss feminism, in where it's just like, yeah, if we just, like, put women in things, it'll be great. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. That's not necessarily true. Women can just as easily oppress other women, and other people in just people in general. It's not, there's no difference there. And I think it just falls into that really simplistic ideology of, like, girl boss feminism.
I think so. And I think that through all of these elements, I'm not sure this film, even other than just having the qualities that Carol Clover ticks off in her description of what a slasher film is, I'm not sure that her underlying argument about the sort of ways in which audiences use the final girl to identify with and to resonate with, because they can't resonate with the male killer. You know, that's sort of central to her argument of her body himself. I think that this film doesn't even really work within that framework. And I'm not saying that it should, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have films that manage to go beyond that.
As we said with the 2006 version of Black Christmas, our big problems with that was that it just felt like it was only the framework. Exactly.
And I think that this film tried really hard to break free from that framework in a lot of respects. I just don't think that it succeeded, and maybe it didn't succeed because it allowed itself to be a Black Christmas. You know, maybe it needed to be called something else. It's not like we don't have other films that are set in sororities that are horror films. I can think of like 3 or 4 off the top of my head. You know, it could have been called anything. Dark Christmas, sorority Christmas. I mean, you know, like, even if it had to be called Christmas at all, I think that this film spent so much time trying to break out of the formula that it went as far as it could, but that was too simplistic. Mm-hmm. Right? If instead it had just said, I don't even know what that framework was, I'm going to start from here and move forward, I think it would have had more success. But instead, it is a complete opposite in many ways of the slasher film, but that's not good enough.
Yeah.
Not in 2019.
Yeah. And I don't think that everything in this film is bad and doesn't work. In fact, I quite liked about half of the movie, because I think the first half does a really nice job of just allowing us to be with these characters. And I really liked the characters, just flat out, like end of sentence. I thought that they were pretty interesting. I liked everything that was going on in their lives. I liked the actresses that were playing them. I thought that they even occasionally got some really funny one-liners here and there, and like the script put them in pretty interesting situations. It's just, as soon as they introduced the element of magic into the film, not even the characters and the actors could save what the script was making them do and say.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so speaking of other things that I think are worth praising, I very much appreciated, not only did we get to sit with the characters, but I think we wanted to sit with them. Mm-hmm. One of my criticisms of a lot of horrors is I don't know why we need to dislike every character, or why every character has to be so fundamentally icky at their core. And I will admit, I thought it was a little too, I'm not sure I'm going to ask someone if I can borrow a feminine hygiene product that has to be washed out and returned. I don't know, honestly, I very intentionally never had a desire to, as an introvert, to live in a sorority house. Mm-hmm. So I realize that I am not that person who would have done that anyway. But like,
any of our listeners are in a sorority, please do let us know whether or not you would share a Diva cup with your sorority sister.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the most grossy things that I've ever encountered. And it was just, and like, also like just putting it in front of other people. Again, I'm a very private person, and I would have made a great Puritan because I have lots of repression. So I understand that like that I'm not that person anyway, but like it did occasionally go a little too like female friendship. But it was so refreshing to see a film where there was not a single catty female, mm-hmm. Where they were supportive of each other, even when one of them, was had food poisoning, right? Yeah. There was still, this like genuine interest in their well-being. I also thought the boyfriend, who I think Nolan was his name, the one who was really good at the beginning and then had been like brainwashed there at the end. Mm-hmm. I thought he was nice. Like they kind of introduced him in a real like gentle way that didn't feel like, hey, notice that this is an ideal version of a boyfriend. So I thought there were, like you said, a lot of really great points up until about the time we introduced the magic.
Yeah.
And I don't know what would have been a good alternative. So if we were going to try to have this message that there's something sort of systemically wrong, I don't think it would have been enough to just have them be doing it just 'cause. Like, I don't think that would have been enough. So I don't know what the alternative would have been, because you needed something that elevated the stakes dramatically. And unfortunately, as you pointed out, we are so entrenched in a rape culture that rape doesn't feel dramatic enough unto itself.
And see, we talked about with the 2006 version how frustrating it was because it didn't feel like it needed to be made and it didn't have anything interesting to add. Whereas that is not what is frustrating about the 2019 version of Black Christmas. What is frustrating about the 2019 version of Black Christmas is that it really does find the little nugget, like it has something interesting to say. It clearly wants to have a conversation about rape culture. It's just that it isn't able to deliver that. And I agree with you. I'm struggling to figure out how, given everything that we know about the movie and the context of it being a part of the Black Christmas larger franchise, that it would be able to say that.
I just don't know. I just don't know how it would do it without becoming either very serious, and therefore maybe not a slasher film at all, or again going the sort of unrealistic route of the supernatural.
I think maybe then, honestly, it might have been better to have taken more of a 1973 Black Christmas approach, in just where you think you have it all figured out and you've got this like clear, clean motive all worked out, but then it's not quite that simple. It was a different frat brother or something, and you just realize, oh, this culture makes you feel like you can do this to women. It's not about that one guy who committed this rape against the main character. It really is just a larger problem, and maybe something like that. I don't know. I'm spitballing here.
But the moment you introduce that, though, I think it ceases to be a slasher film that this film is still trying to be for financial purposes, right? Like, this film is, I think, trying to capitalize on my favorite, the horror Christmas season, and this isn't an A24 production, right?
Yeah.
This is a slasher film. Because I was thinking, like, okay, well, what if we found out that it actually wasn't the fraternity at all, and that it was, like, the police force, and then the fraternity actually comes to the rescue, but some of them are like, well, maybe we should. And the moment I started to, like, think about it, I was like, that's an Ari Aster film, right? That's an A24, we're going to go weird places, and we're going to have characters that are going to be not always good, but not always bad. Like, that's just not...
But that would have been more interesting.
What this film was going to be. It would have been.
I think, as we've already kind of established in our previous episodes, we're not a big fan of just slasher for slasher's sake. And I think that this film really had the opportunity, and I think it even honestly maybe wanted to be more than a slasher for slasher's sake. It's just that it didn't... what it chooses to do and what it chooses to add to the slasher genre, which is magic, is just totally undermines so much of what the film is about, what was important, and what was important to driving home the film's themes.
I will say that there were a couple moments where the slasher for slasher film worked, but again, we're taking out a huge chunk of the middle. I thought the first 10 or 15 minutes, it's not revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination to have it be not the person walking behind you.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, Anthony, but I mean, I can say that as a female, I am often, you know, just like really aware of that person who's walking behind me. And so, you know, it may not have been revolutionary in terms of something you'd never seen before, but it was touching on a legitimate fear that is grounded in reality. I thought, you know, when she knocks on the door and then, you know, it's the killer, and then there's like the snow angel scene.
Yeah.
You know, I was down for all of that. That was fine. I think one of the things that happened as a result of the magic, though, that I would have appreciated, because I appreciated it being in the 73 film, is this clear idea that in these scuffles, if you will, there is a clear person in the right and a clear person in the wrong. Whereas I think that in the 73 film, you know, yes, Peter was too clingy, and like you argued, he's the villain, but he didn't kill those people, and arguably, if we're gonna like try to paint Peter in a positive light, admittedly, he's had a rough 24 hours, right? Like, finding out that you're not gonna get to have a say in the life of your child, especially if you're conservative, right? Like, I mean, we have to maybe think that maybe after this 24-hour period, he would have, like, cooled down. So the film ends us with someone that we have to ask, you know, she's not a monster, but she's certainly not an innocent.
Mm-hmm. She has blood on her hands.
She had blood on her hands, and in a way that is very ambiguous, morally speaking. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the 2019 film, there are clear people that are always in the right, and that they can fight back however they need to without needing to think about what their fighting might do to the situation. And that idea just kind of was a little like, I don't know.
You know, I just thought of a slight change of how I think maybe perhaps the film could have, if without changing anything that happened. So you have to include the magic elements. So they destroy the thing, they light the thing on fire, and the film ends right about there where they're all outside and everything is good. I don't think the film should end there. If you really want to develop in on this whole "you're a fighter" theme, that's something that's clearly important to the writers of this film, well, then I think they should maybe have a conversation about, like, how it's over, but then one of the other characters is like, it's not over, we're going to have to continue fighting. Like, they're not going to believe us inherently, or like showing like more of like, maybe more of what was like teased in Get Out, where like the police show up and you're like, oh my God, this is not okay. They did just burn down this entire house and kill all those people in there. Are they going to be believed? Are they? I don't know. You've spent the whole movie telling me that they wouldn't be believed. So why does this situation, now that you've destroyed the magic at the end, why does that change anything? I don't think it does. And I think just at least having that moment right at the end where you're like, oh, this is not they may have like defeated those people, but they didn't win. This fight is so much bigger than just that.
I think you're absolutely correct. So, as you know, I adore the idea of like what happens after, right? Because prison, right? Prison is what happens after. Like, you know, our system is just too broken to have it be any other way. But it would be really interesting to have a subsequent film where all of these survivors have banded together and they are fighting, but they are now beginning to be unable to want to separate the supernatural from just the systemic, right? Like, and so kind of like, now that's a really dark film, and that's not a slasher film, but I think you're right that if, in order for this film to be successful, it needed to be prepared to go all the way instead of starting down the road.
Yeah, because there's a lot of good there, like we've said. There's a lot of good stuff here, and this is a film that clearly is trying, and like it's got the right intentions behind it. It just, the entire failure of this film is in the execution.
There are two other things that I want to mention. One of them is just a pet peeve, and then one of them is a more relevant thing. So the pet peeve is that it drives me absolutely batty when people make films or books, not even just horror, just in general, TV shows, anything, where they just clearly have no idea how the institute about which they are writing works. So that whole idea that like a tenured faculty member could be fired because a petition has been signed is just utter nonsense. And I think that it bothers me so much because, again, here was another missed opportunity that if we're going to talk about a system being broken, let's talk about a system that in an effort to make a right move, and that is to protect academic freedom, that has been taken over by people who use that as a defense to teach syllabi that are not decolonialized, that are not made into anything other than the traditional, quote, white male syllabus. Like, again, there was just such a missed opportunity, and by making it just seem as straightforward as long as we sign a petition, that's again all that needs to happen. First off, again, not how that works.
That's not how tenure works.
No. Second, that again misses out on this really interesting systemic debate. But the one thing that I did want to say, that the one area where I think this film began to do interesting things in terms of, to go back to my favorite thing, place, is by having the so much of the film be not in their house, in the sorority, but in the fraternity, and to have these penetrations, and the terrible place be almost just as much the one as the other. And so there was some interesting things. I think that you could read the location and the use of place in these three films. I think that would, for me, allow me to engage in things that wouldn't make me sad about some of the misses of the 2006 and the 2019. Because I think in terms of place, they're doing exactly what they should for this like larger conversation with one another.
Yeah, those are some good final thoughts to end
Just
on.
some final thoughts. Yes. This ends our Black Christmas escapade. We are setting aside our holiday-themed episodes until the next holiday we decide to do an episode for. But we are setting aside our Black Christmases, and we are returning actually to our other sort of series, because we are going to have our next episode be on
Army of Darkness!
Yay! So this is our third film. We've been kind of sprinkling in Evil Dead along the way, because it's such a fun series to talk about, and each one feels like you're not talking about the Evil Dead franchise because it's so different. So we very much look forward to you listening into that episode. And in the meantime, please be sure
to follow us on social media, which are linked in the description, and go ahead and rate and review our podcast wherever you get your podcast from, and be sure to tell your friends about us. Thank you so much. Bye.
And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.